Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mark Cares Inc. conversation with our guest artist, concert pianist Richard Alston. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you, Lillie. Can I call you Lillie?
Yeah, please,
But-
please, please. You've always called me Lily.
Well.
Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. I am a member of the board of directors of the Mark Cares Inc., a new 501c3 formed here in Montclair, New Jersey, to empower those who lead lives that are marginalized in our community, and also to contribute to ways people can be empowered to address various issues in social justice and equity in our community. This particular concert that we're giving in October will help us contribute to MESH, the Montclair Emergency Services for the Homeless. Let me just say a few words now about our guest artist, Richard Alston, who is a native of East Orange. Richard is a graduate of Juilliard in New York City, and since his teens, he has captivated audiences through his solo recitals, concerto appearances with orchestras, live opera performance, and I always like to highlight that he played the role of on piano of Jasper Brown for the Metropolitan Opera's production of Porgy and Bess.
And that was the first production.
Oh, and the first production. I did apologize. I wasn't here. I was living in Richmond, Indiana, so I was unable to attend that production of Porgy and Bess. Richard has won any number of awards, an achievement award from the National Association of Negro Women. He's won an award for excellence from our own New Jersey Education Association. And he has been a guest artist for our own New Jersey Symphony, as well as recitals at the University of Tulsa and the West Jersey Chamber Music Society. So welcome, Richard. We're
Thank
just
you
so
for
glad
having
you're
me.
you're a friend of
you for
everyone in
having me.
Montclair and the Mark. So let's get started with a few questions. And my first question is, at what point in your life, seeing that you began your music training so early, at what point did you decide this would be a career?
Well, that question is answered by two experiences I had as a young kid. I loved the piano. From the time I was 4, my grandmother was a pianist, piano teacher, a soprano, church musician. It's in my blood. And unfortunately, she passed away when I was 5 years old. And then my parents found a wonderful local teacher named Dorothy Early. But to answer the question specifically, I remembered seeing two pianists on television. One was the debut of Andre Watts with New York Philharmonic, and the other was a pianist by the name of Liberace. I don't know how many people out there remember that name, but he made a movie, very rare movie called Sincerely Yours, where he played a concert pianist. What I got from watching him in that film was that he loved playing the piano, and the audience loved hearing him, watching him. Then when I saw Andre Watts, that brought it, if I could say, home, because here was a young man that looked like me, and he was a young virtuoso. And so I decided right then I wanted to be a concert pianist. But when I started studying with, I call her my great teacher, Sylvia Rabinoff, when I was around 12 in New York City, one lesson she said to me, do you want to be a good piano player or do you want to be a concert artist? Mind you, if you choose the latter, it's going to be a life of work and practice. I already knew I wanted to do that. And I'm blessed. I was blessed. I'm blessed now to have a father that I'm very close to. When I started studying with Mrs. Rabinoff, she wanted me to go see concerts of pianists playing, performing. My father took me to a concert every weekend. We went to Hunter College. We went to Lincoln Center. We went to Carnegie Hall. Every great pianist he took me to. So I looked at them performing. I knew that that was what I wanted to do. Um, I remember I did a performance with several musicians at Town Hall. And after I played the piece, I remember seeing one of my favorite pianists, Arthur Rubinstein, taking a bow. I learned from him that he loved playing the piano. I learned this by just watching him on stage. He came out smiling. And none of the other pianists did that. They always came out looking very serious and dour, I can use that word. And but Rubinstein, he had this big smile on his face. Anyway, I did this performance at Town Hall, and after I finished the piece, I smiled at the audience and bowed. And then there were some people in the balcony, and I waved to them and I bowed. And Mrs. Raploff said to me the next day, "What did you do on stage? What people were talking about you?" I said, "Well, I just bowed, and I saw people in the audience in the balcony clapping for me, and I waved to them."
You
So
were a rock star, so you're kind of working your posse out there,
well,
kind of
it wasn't so much that I
the
saw
Richard Alston mosh pit out there.
I saw Arthur Rubinstein acknowledge the audience. More importantly, when Rubinstein walked out on stage and he smiled, I felt that he was happy I was there. I felt that he appreciated the fact I was there. And so that was one reason why I was only, I think, 15 or 16. When I did that, I appreciated them. And that's like, um, there is this thing called Facebook, and I have wonderful acquaintances. And I make it a point when any of my Facebook friends congratulate me or say something, I acknowledge it.
Well,
I acknowledge it.
yeah.
And it's like, for example, when my birthday, I'm a Capricorn. When my birthday arises, many people wish me happy birthday, and I thank every one of them. On one of my Facebook pages, I have 5,000 acquaintances, I'll call them, and I think it may take me 2 weeks.
I'm one of them, everyone. I claimed my slot among Richard's 5,000, and I consider myself very fortunate. Let me ask you a question and maybe this aligns still with the smiling, but I'm sure for some of those parents and guardians and grandparents, aunts and uncles out there, and their young, soon to be piano prodigies out there, what does it take? What is that work to be the concert pianist, the professional pianist, as opposed to someone who plays the piano?
Well, the word,
What do you do every day?
the word, what do I do every day?
What do you do? What do
well,
you and
well,
the piano do?
well, the first thing is love. Love. You see, when I was studying from the time I was 5 years old until I was 12 years old, with Dorothy Early of East Orange, I really didn't know what practicing was. But what I did love was the piano, playing the piano. So when she assigned a piece of music for me to learn, I just played. I don't want to say I practiced. I just played it and played it and played it until I went to see her, and she gave me another piece to play. And then sometimes I would hear a piece of music. My family, my father brought me an LP of Arthur Rubinstein, and he had on this recording a work called Schubert Impromptu. And I fell in love with it. And I went to, I called her Aunt Dorothy after the years of a relationship. And I said, I want to play this piece of music. And she said, what's the name of it? And I said, I don't know. But it goes da 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 da. And she started playing, and I said, that's it. And she said, okay, you'll get to that eventually. You'll get to that.
Not
But
today.
not today. Right. But that's okay. So what does it take? You have to observe And this is, I think, with any child in any area, what are they showing a love for? Because that's where it starts. That's where it starts. And then to let them know what this could lead to. Now, what's important is that the parent acknowledges the love. Okay? Um, Good or bad, Venus and Serena would not be where they are if it wasn't for their father. Wynton Marsalis would not be where he was if it wasn't for his father. So the parents use it because the child can have all the love in the world, but if they're not getting the necessary support, then they can fall by the wayside. I used to teach a class at college called Music Appreciation, where I would teach about Bach and Beethoven, opera, and fugues. And of course, the students had to take this course because it filled a humanities requirement. But I would tell them, I said, there's another reason you need to pay attention. You may have a daughter who's 4 years old, 5 years old, and for some reason, she's going around the house, oh, 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 and because she heard a soprano. Now, because I exposed you to Madame Butterfly, you know that this could be the beginning of something. So you're not going to discourage her. Let her listen to more opera. Encourage her to sing higher. But that's where, and so you start with the love of whatever it is. And then now the other thing the parent has to do is you must supervise their development. Meaning, if it is learning an instrument, you can, many parents say, and I've heard this, well, I shouldn't have to make them practice. Oh, yes, you should. Oh, yes, you should.
It's called parenting, right?
Well,
You should make
the
them.
thing, well, see, the thing is that a lot of parents feel if they really want to do this, I shouldn't make them. Practicing is work. Practicing is work. All right. I mentioned Serena and her sister. They would not have gotten on that court if Papa hadn't said, okay, no, we're not going to just spend 15 minutes. We need an hour of practice. What's his name, the golfer? His father, again,
Tiger Woods.
Tiger Woods. His father was behind him. So, I mean, I think if you scratch the surface of any performer that was successful, you will find good, bad, maybe even ugly, that they had a parent behind them and was encouraging them, sometimes pushing them. But the key is the love. That's why I do what I do. I love playing the piano. I love sharing it. When the coronavirus hit all of us, the church I was playing for at the time was not having services. I began every service when we were open with a musical arrangement, concert arrangement for piano of a hymn. And I missed that. And so, what did I start doing in May or April, right after coronavirus? Every Saturday night, I recorded a concert version of a hymn. Would you believe there are over 100 on my YouTube channel of them?
I know I've seen them all, so I do know there are over 100. I can just pick the hymn I want to hear for the moment, right? So
Well,
it's a full range of them.
yes, yes. And the bottom line was I feel obligated to share, whether it be musically or through information, what I've been exposed to. Obligated to.
Yeah, well, one of the powerful things you mentioned is the work you do in teaching students in Essex County College. And I know one of the things you have done, for example, for me at Drew University was the concert on Classically Black with composers of African descent. I know you've done it in Boston and other places around the country. Could you say something about crafting this particular kind of program, not only as an artistic experience for you and your audience, but also this particular program as an educational experience for your audience to learn more about composers of African descent?
Well, it actually began when I was about 8 years old. I was studying out of a series piano course called John Thompson.
I remember that one. Everybody remembers John Thompson piano series.
And one of the pieces that came up in, I think, the second grade book was a piece called Carry Me Back to Old Virginia. And Miss Early made a point to say to me, this was written by a Negro. We were called that in the 60s. And so right away, here I was playing this piece by James Bland and also playing a Bach minuet and also playing a Clementi sonatina. There was not much talk about inclusion as it is now, but as a child, I was taught inclusion. Here was a black man, right, being assigned to me right next to Bach. And so then I began to, I learned other materials. Then I began to realize that these wonderful, wonderful composers went all the way back to the 1700s. Tomorrow I will play a piece by a composer that lived during the time of Mozart, a black man. And I realized that they weren't being programmed. Uh, Also, I think what stimulated it was that I was asked at Rutgers to create a course called Black Music in America. And so all of this, but then the title, Classically Black, came from there was a wonderful a woman, I can't think of her name all of a sudden, whose father was a member of the Symphony of the New World. She was a television producer, and she had the idea to produce a 1 hour documentary on black composers and black instrumentalists. And she asked would I be the musical director and also perform with it. So that was where the title came from. And I played these pieces, and then I realized she talked about each of the composers, but then I realized that I not only wanted to play these composers in concerts, but it had to be a lecture recital, that I couldn't just play them. I had to let the audience know where these composers came from, what type of life these composers lived in developing and writing their music. And it now, I'm going to play a piece by the composer Florence Price tomorrow. Now these composers are being included, but yet we as a people only make 1% of us playing in symphony orchestras around the country. 1%. And that's not because we're not good. Okay? So this has to be done. And I remember a number of years ago, maybe even 2 decades ago, the Juilliard School, my alma mater, had a reunion for black and Hispanic students. And this young man who was a student there, he's actually now the dean of a music department, music department at the university. He got up and he was very angry because he said during the question and answer session, why wasn't I taught about black composers? Why wasn't I taught? And the president at the time was a wonderful man. He said, well, we're going to work on it. And then I stood up and I said, listen, I teach black music history. And the textbook I use is The Music of Black Americans by Eileen Southern. And I'm going to send 2 copies to my alma mater here at Juilliard. So you will never have to worry about any more finding information about. I guess I talk too much, and I get.
No,
I get
you're just doing some truth telling. So and that's a good thing. And we're not surprised that you're doing that. I mean, one of the interesting things, of course, in the classical music genre, whether it's uh, um, orchestral performance, but would also include opera or ballet, all of these elite forms of performance. Most venues and most orchestras and ballet companies are very concerned that they will no longer have an audience, in part because they haven't reached out to a general population. I mean, if you're actually selling tickets to an elite stratum, that actually is a tiny pool of people buying tickets
Yes.
to your opera. And
Yes.
so, one of the things we see now is, the Met is at your AMC theater, right?
Yes.
And you can go see an opera at
Yes.
the movie theater.
Yes.
I would assume that greater inclusion of a diversity of composers as well as performers is actually good for the bottom line.
Oh yes.
Right?
Oh yes. And you see, the other thing is, you talk about how this come about. I feel obligated to share these composers, my composers who look like me, with the public. And I witnessed, I'm not going to say the name of the competition, but recently I watched the competition that was held, and there was a pianist of African descent, and this pianist did not include in his program one piece by a composer of color. Where on the other hand, I just saw a singer who was in this international competition, and he made a point to include a song by Florence Price. He made a point to sing a spiritual arrangement by Margaret Bonds. And even though he said he didn't make it to the final, he was able to expose. We have to. And it's not just this. I would do a master class, and I said to this one young lady, she played a wonderful piece by Liszt, and I said, I think she was Korean, and I said, what do you know by Korean composer? And she looked at me like I had three eyes. And I said, well, aren't you Korean? And she said, oh, yes. I said, there are no Korean piano composers who wrote for the piano? And she said, I think so. I said, well, do me a favor. Don't think anymore. Fine. I said, you owe it. This is a composer of like you. You're Korean. And if you're waiting for me to play Korean composers, okay, I'm playing the black composer, but you're Korean. You are
Yeah.
obligated to play your people.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I get emotional.
It is an emotional topic because it is very personal.
Yes.
It isn't. So it's about the music,
Yes.
but it's also about the person and the performer,
Yes.
and doing something that actually is transformative in
Yes.
people's lives, especially
Yes.
the lives of children. I was thinking about, as you were talking about your experience at Juilliard, that I should at least take an opportunity and mention the Oberlin Conservatory of Music. Since we're, yes, I thought I might mention another great school of music,
Okay.
which I'm very familiar. And one of the things that Oberlin is doing actually in the conservatory, which in some ways was very much like Juilliard or the New England Conservatory, and would kind of teach the canon, the Euro-American canon of music, is they're changing pretty much every part of the curriculum, but even music theory is now going to be inclusive of other music theories.
Well,
And
I hear you. Excuse me for interrupting. I could never understand why, for example, there is jazz theory books, right? But I could never understand why something as simple as a chart was not introduced in a music theory class. You're telling me to memorize that you cannot double the third when you write a chorale. You really ask me to memorize. You can't have parallel fifths. Wait a minute. I remember arranging. This is crazy. I remember arranging a piece of music for a choir one time while I was in Juilliard, and I looked at the arrangement. I said, "Oh my goodness, I doubled the
You
third."
broke that rule.
And I said, "Wait a minute."
And it sounded good.
No, it didn't. Well, the point was, why am I restrained to this? This was at that time the 20th century. I'm not writing a chorale for the cathedral like Bach did. I'm writing a hymn arrangement, spiritual arrangement for my choir in East Orange. And so the point is this. I always had an objection, and people may say, "Oh, Alston, don't go there." Well, you're teaching me algebra. Okay, now with technology like it is, we have scanners and all of that. But my point was, I said to a teacher once, I can go and buy a loaf of bread, a carton of milk, and eggs, and not need algebra. Why are you asking me to do this? So the thing is, teach me how to balance a checkbook. That's what I'm going to need to know how to do. Okay. So if you're arranging or looking at a chart that has guitar chords on it and no bass clef, teach how the musician can make that into music at the piano. So I could never understand when you mentioned this. I'm sorry, it got me worked up a bit because
I think your bio somewhere says that you're passionate. I think it's literally written down. And so I am not surprised. I'm sure no audience is surprised. So you're consistent. That's a good thing.
well, all I can say is I think I got that from my father. He's a very energetic person. There is a video of him, I think, at 89 or 90 years old, dancing at this party. And so he has an abundance. My mother was the serious one. He had the joie de vivre, and still has it, the life of the party. And so I think I got that from him. But also, Mrs. Rabinoff would tell me stories of great composers. And the stories were told to help me understand the music, help me play the music. I remember I was learning a sonata by Beethoven, and I was like 16, and she says, "You're not bringing out of this sonata the pain that this man endured. You know, he was not a happy man because of things he experienced." And then she said, "Come with me." And we walked a few feet away, and she said, "Do you see that?" And above her bookcase was this gold mask. And she said, "That's a death mask. That mask was created after he died. They put the plaster on his face and they created that mask." But she said, "What I want you to notice, when you look at that mask, he at death, he wasn't at rest. Look at his face. You can still see the pain. So when you play this sonata, remember that." Oh, don't get me
Yeah,
started with
you want to hear the pain, right?
Yes.
In the
Yes.
actual piece.
Another story. So you talk about. I learned all these stories from her. I was learning a piece of music by an American composer named Charles Griffiths. Now he wrote in the style of Debussy and Ravel, and she assigned a piece called "The White Peacock." It was like nothing I had played before. It was not like Liszt. It was not like Chopin. It was not like Mozart. Um, and I really didn't want to learn it. And so I came for my lesson, and she said, "Okay, let's start with the White Peacock." And I said, "Not today." And she said, "Okay, we'll hear it next week." I came back the following week, and she said, "Okay, I heard your Bach. Now let's go to White Peacock." And I said, "Oh, no, not today." The third lesson, she said, "We're going to start with the White Peacock." And I said, still, she said, "Okay, no lesson. I'm not going to teach you. Where's your mother's check?" I said, "I have it." She said, "Give it to me." And my father would drop me off at the lesson because my lessons were like 2 hours, almost 3 hours. He would go see a movie. We were in New York City. So she said, "Well, your father's not here, is he?" I said, "No." She said, "Well, you can help me clean my house." I never told my mother
I'm
what happened.
sure.
My mother did find out 10 years later. I was teaching a student at my mother's house, and I told the story. My mother was in the kitchen, and she came out and looked at me.
Did
And
she ask you to pay her for that check, or you
no, no,
didn't
no.
get the lesson?
I think she wanted to do something more than pay her, but because it happened so long ago. But the point I want to make is, I did learn it, and then after I learned it, Mrs. Ravenel said, "Okay, I want you to go to the Bronx Zoo. I want you to observe a peacock for an hour. You can't play this piece if you have not seen how a peacock moves. Peacocks can run. We're not talking about a pigeon. I know when you walk down my
Yeah,
street, you see pigeons on the street in New York. A peacock is not a pigeon.
that's a
But
very different type of music.
yes, so the point we're trying to make is, so when it comes to talking about the music, I was, and still am, I think, like a sponge. And I encourage all young people, when it comes to knowledge, to be a sponge. I heard a great person say that once. Absorb all the information you can possibly absorb like a sponge. You might not even need that information right away, but absorb it. Listen to what someone's telling you. And so that's what I was taught when it came to information, when it came to knowledge. To, in fact, Mrs. Rabinoff auditioned me to study with her for 3 hours. When the audition was over, she began telling me about music that I would learn. And there was a wonderful man who worked in the public school system who knew her and arranged the audition. And when the audition was over, my parents and I and Mr. Ovid Lewis got in the elevator. My father was red as a beet. He was so, just so, and Ovid Lewis looked at me, and I was a little kid. He looked down at me, and we don't have censors. I'm gonna beep it myself. He said, "If she tells you to eat, you eat." And my parents never cursed, never cursed. And he said this in front of them and me. I felt like my father was gonna hit me. I didn't say the word, but because I never heard language like that, I had, on the street. But that was the beginning where he told me, listen, follow your instructions. And I'll say something, and I have to say this to young people, because we live in a time where you can be 12 years old and you think you know it all. And even when it comes to
They
studying,
don't? 12-year-olds don't know it all?
no,
No.
no.
That's good to
The,
know.
the public is leading them to believe that they do. And sometimes I say, so the parents even believe that they do. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is this, is that when you go to study an instrument, an athletic activity, you have what are called teachers and coaches. And the bottom line is, if you knew so much, you would be teaching and coaching somebody. One of the things that gets me, there are these TV shows of like American Idol, and even in, someone the TV show like America's Next Top Model was on, and the contestants would say, "Well, this is my style," and someone like Lionel Richie is trying to give them advice, and it's like, wait a minute, they're sitting on that side of the room, you're sitting here, okay? You don't have a style.
Lionel Richie has a style,
He
and
has
you
a
don't.
style. You don't. But you see, we live in this time where, unfortunately, I don't know whether it's not any longer a fear of authority. I know you and I know we grew up, we feared authority.
Very much so.
Okay. But these days,
I'm still following those lessons.
yes, me too.
No, any minute, my Aunt Annie is going to, come out and
Oh yeah.
reprimand me for
Oh
something.
yeah.
Yes.
Oh, when the time came to get a baby grand piano, I don't know if you heard of this because you weren't in this area. In Newark, there was a company called the Griffith Piano Company, and it came time for my parents to get a baby grand. We went to the place. I sat down and I began playing the Mozart Sonata in C major, and I reached a point where I couldn't go any further. And when we got home, my mother had the catalog and the picture of the piano I just played. She came into my bedroom and said, "You want this? You want this?" She taped it to the wall of my bedroom and says, "Don't you ever not be able to play a piece from beginning to end if you want that." So the way you look at me,
So now you do entire concerts.
yes, yes, because I can play a piece from beginning to end.
Well, that's so funny. We're coming to close to the interview, and I was going to ask you to play a piece of a piece, but maybe you would get in trouble for,
No, no,
for doing that. I don't.
I can, I
But
can.
I'm sure everyone would just love to hear you
Okay.
play one of. Who's your favorite composer, by the way? I know that's sometimes not a
Well,
very
there are
smart
many.
question.
I'll play a portion of a piece of I think one of my composers on the top of my favorite list, and actually his name is Franz Liszt. And I remember again. I'll try to be brief with this. I mentioned Andre Watts earlier. I heard him play this, and then I had to learn it. I had to learn it. So this is a little bit of La Campanella, which is an Italian word means the bells.
Thank you very much. So everyone, Mr. Richard Alston on piano. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bravo, bravo. Thank you so very much. And to everyone listening to this interview, the Mark Cares Inc. is sponsoring a concert by Mr. Alston, Classically Black. Composers of African descent on October 16th, 2022 at St. Mark's United Methodist Church in Montclair, New Jersey. And then there will be a second concert in that series in February 2023 that will feature traditional spirituals and African American art songs. And so look for the promotional materials and get your tickets. Again, this will be a fundraiser for the programs and work in the community of the Mark Cares Inc. What would you like to, what advice would you like to give to, especially the parents and guardians and young people out there in the music world as your kind of parting statements of wisdom? Um, as someone who has been so successful not only in performing but also as a professor, as a lecturer, as a mentor, actually.
Well, for the young people, I would say whatever is burning in your heart, whatever it is. I'm a musician, so if it is music, if you like singing, sing. I just posted on a friend's page, "Life is a song, sing it." So that if it's music, play it. Surround yourself with people, young people. Look for them and play for each other. I was told once that association breeds assimilation. So that you want to associate with people, young people, who are like minded of like yourself, who have goals. For the parents, watch your children, listen to your children, observe your children, expose them to as much as you possibly can, whether it be athletics, music, cooking, okay? And then when you see that one of those things you're exposed them to makes them smile, gives them joy, then leave everything else to the side and concentrate on that. And do everything you can possibly do to keep them smiling because of what you shared with them.
Well, thank you, Richard. I think that may be very good advice for those of us who are all grown up and adults is to find the people who support our joy, to continue searching in life for our own joy,
Yes.
and look for
Yes.
that space.
Yes, because you see, I said association breeds assimilation. If you associate with somebody, either they're going to become like you or you're going to become like them. So you want to associate with people who you want to be like. That's who you want to associate with.
And that's why you're my friend, Richard. I'm going to I'm going to associate with you. I will be able to hear wonderful music and words of wisdom as well. So thank you so very much on behalf of the Mark Cares
You're
Inc.
welcome. Thank you for
And
having me.
remember, we will be seeing you again for a wonderful concert. And you're our friend, and know that whenever you're performing, we will be there.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone,
you.
so very much.